Today we'll start with the reflex. Okay, reflex action. This we've discussed about different portions. Oh yes, we have discussed about hypothalamus. Okay, in the hypothalamus, different nuclei are there, and their roles, their functions. I told you in the previous class. Then comes the functions of the medulla oblongata. Okay, this medulla oblongata, pons. Okay, and the cerebral cortex. In brief, we will discuss about these 3 points today. Okay. I'll share the slide. Okay. So we discussed about the hypothalamus, and in the hypothalamus, I told you about the neurons, a group of neurons, and they are localized in some specific portions in the hypothalamus, and they are termed as a hypothalamic nuclei. Different hypothalamic nuclei are there, and of that, I have listed out some important ones. And I told you to read about the roles of these hypothalamic nuclei and their names and their short forms. Okay. Then next comes the functions of the medulla oblongata. Okay. So this is also a part of the brain, and what are the different portions in the medulla oblongata. Okay. The medulla oblongata contains the neurons which are responsible to control the cardiac activities, respiratory functions. They are also associated in the control of vomiting and vasomotor center. Okay, so in the medulla oblongata there are cardiac center, respiratory center, vomiting center, and vasomotor centers. Okay, and the medulla oblongata deals with the autonomic involuntary functions. Okay, it should be involuntary functions. So the respiratory center of medulla oblongata, they operate through chemoreceptors. I told you about the chemoreceptors, right? The chemoreceptors are the receptors which are sensing fluctuations in the chemical substances. One such example was the carotid sinus and the carotid bodies and the aortic bodies. I told you, okay, they are also baroreceptors. They also act as chemoreceptors. So these chemoreceptors are the receptors. They are going to sense the change in the fluctuations of the chemical substances. One such example is drop in the oxygen concentration in the blood, or rise in the carbon dioxide concentration in the blood, or rise in the hydrogen ion concentration in the blood. Okay, so they are going to be sensed by the chemoreceptors, and the signal will go to the respiratory center. And we discuss about the different centers for respiration. Say TPG, central pattern generator, then dorsal group of neurons, the ventral group of neurons. Okay, VRG, DRG, like that, right? So those are going to act through the respiratory center, and respiratory center is located in medulla oblongata. Okay, and another center, the cardiac center. Okay, cardiac center located in the medulla oblongata. It operates through sympathetic parasympathetic system. Say, do you remember I told you about the how the sympathetic nervous system increases the cardiac activity? Say, when the person has a fear, the heart rate increases, right? So when the heart rate increases, There is also increase in the cardiac output. There is increase in the BP, right? When you discuss about the cardiac cycle, how the cardiac cycle is regulated. So it is through the sympathetic nervous system, which is going to increase the rate of heart contraction or the cardiac output or the BP. And it is the parasympathetic system which is going to inhibit the sympathetic activities. Okay, so the cardiac center in medulla oblongata works through the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system. The sympathetic nervous system is going to stimulate the heart rate, while the parasympathetic activity is going to minimize, to inhibit it. Okay. They work side by side. The meaning is then the vasomotor center. Okay, vasomotor center means the activity of the blood vessels are going to be controlled by the neurons in the medulla oblongata, and this vasomotor center operates through the baroreceptors. Here again comes the carotid bodies and the aortic bodies. They are chemoreceptors, they are also baroreceptors. They are going to sense the drop in the BP. Baroreceptors means pressure receptors. Okay, so when there is drop in the BP, when there is supposed drop in the blood volume, then there will be drop in the blood pressure. When there is drop in the blood pressure, the carotid bodies, then the aortic bodies will give a signal to the vasomotor center to increase the contraction of the blood vessels. When the blood vessels contract, particularly the arterioles, when they contract, the BP will increase. This restoration of the BP will act through the renin-angiotensin system. Okay, renin-angiotensin and also aldosterone system. RAS. Do you know about RAS? RAAS? Do you know about RAS? RAAS? Yes? Yes. Right. So, this vasomotor center, yes. Let them try again.
Ma'am, can you please show the previous slide?
Yes.
Ma'am, can you please show the previous slide?
I cannot hear clearly. Tell again what you were asking or telling.
Ma'am, can you please show the previous slide?
Oh, okay. Previous slide means this one.
Yes, ma'am.
You joined late. Did you join late?
No, ma'am, for screenshot.
Oh. But these things are there already in my notes. You read from the notes. It will be more clear there. Okay. Everything is there. So in the when we discuss about the medulla oblongata consists of cardiac centers, respiratory centers, vomiting center, and vasomotor center. Cardiac center will work through this parasympathetic and the parasympathetic system. The respiratory center will work through the chemoreceptors. Vasomotor centers will work through the baroreceptors. So the vasomotor center baroreceptors, two examples are carotid bodies and aortic bodies. They are baroreceptors. They are also chemoreceptors. Okay, and the reflex centers of vomiting, coughing, sneezing, and swallowing are also located in the medulla. Okay, the vomiting center, coughing center, sneezing, and swallowing, they are also located in medulla. Okay, so you remember what are the functions of medulla oblongata? They are associated in the cardiac control, okay, the cardiac activities, the respiratory activities, vomiting, vasomotor, coughing, sneezing, and also swallowing. Okay, then comes the pons. Okay, I'm giving you very much in brief, okay, only the salient points. Pons, okay, the pons contains nuclei that relay signals from forebrain to the cerebellum. Okay, nuclei that deal primarily with sleep, respiration, swallowing, bladder control, hearing, equilibrium, taste, eye movement, facial expressions, facial sensation, and posture. Okay, so you have to remember what are the functions associated with pons. So within the pons is a pneumotaxic center. So this pneumotaxic center is associated with respiration, right? So the within the pons is the pneumotaxic center. It is a nucleus in the pons that regulates the change from inspiration to expiration. Pneumotaxic center is the center which is associated to stop inspiration and to start expiration. Okay, where is it located? It is located in pons. The pons also contains sleep paralysis center of the brain as well as generating the dreams of rapid eye movement sleep. So when we discuss about sleep, what is this rapid eye movement sleep? What are the different types of sleep? We will discuss. So in the sleep, there is two types of sleep. That is the activated sleep and deactivated sleep. Okay. So in that two types, there will be one type there will be rapid eye movement. In another, rapid eye movement will be absent. Okay, so that we will discuss when we discuss about sleep. So what you have to know here, pons is also associated with control of sleep, particularly for rapid eye movement sleep. Okay, so pons is having different functions in sleep, respiration, swallowing, bladder control, hearing, equilibrium, taste, eye movement, facial expression, facial sensation, and posture. Okay, and pons has a particularly one important center, that is pneumotaxic center. Pneumotaxic center is the center which, when it is activated, when it is stimulated, the neurons in the pneumotaxic center, when they are stimulated, it will terminate inspiration and initiate expiration. Okay. Then comes the cerebral cortex. So what are the roles of the cerebral cortex? How is the cerebral cortex and all those you have to study in anatomy. Okay, so here I am concerned with the function. So where are the cerebral cortex associated? Cerebral cortex plays key role in memory, attention, awareness, okay, perceptual awareness, thought, language, and consciousness. Okay, so cerebral cortex is associated with all these functions. So this you remember this only. Okay, memory, it is associated in cerebral cortex. Attention means the neurons located in the cerebral cortex will be fired to cause more of the memory. Okay, then to cause attention, to bring awareness, to bring thought, okay, then language and consciousness. So if the cerebral cortex neurons, okay, neurons in the cerebral cortex are destroyed, they are going to hamper any of these functions or all of these functions. Okay, again in the cerebral cortex they are divided into two areas. One is the sensory area and another is the motor area. Okay, the sensory areas, These are the areas that receive and process the information from the senses. Okay, and the parts of the cortex that receive sensory inputs from thalamus are called primary sensory areas. So you may be asked, what are the sensory areas in the cortex? So these are nothing but the portion, okay, the portion or the areas of the cortex that receive sensory inputs from thalamus, okay, and they are that portion which receives from the thalamus, they are called primary sensory areas, okay, which are receiving only from the thalamus. Then the sense of vision, audition, touch, they are served by primary visual cortex, primary auditory cortex, and primary somatosensory cortex. Okay, so in general, the two hemispheres receive information from the opposite side of the body. So this you might be knowing that the two hemispheres, okay, on the cerebral cortex, they are receiving information from the opposite side of the body. For example, right primary somatosensory cortex receives information from the left limbs, and the right visual cortex receives information from the left visual field. Are you aware of this visual field? Do you know what is this visual field? Any idea? Hello?
No, ma'am.
Uh, if you don't know, actually, every animal, okay, every normal animal are having two eyes, okay. So one eye is going to see one field. When you close one eye, your another eye will be seeing a field, okay, means in how far it can see, okay. So if say like this eye will be seeing through your nose, the visual field means that how will I say, wait, okay, show you how is this visual field. See, you consider this picture is seen from the top of head of an animal. From the top of head of an animal, this is the left eye and this is the right eye. Okay, this right eye will be seeing objects which are present over here, okay, through these nerve tracks. About these nerve tracks, I will explain later on when we discuss about eye. This eye will be able to see objects present in these locations, but not in this location. Okay, this left eye will be able to see the objects which are located in these locations, but not in this location. That means the area where an eye is able to see the objects, that is the visual field of that eye. This is the right visual field. This is the left visual field. Do you get now? What is the meaning of this visual field?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So this is the meaning. Okay. Here. Where was I? So, for example, the right visual cortex. The right visual cortex means in the cortex, okay, the portion of the cortex which is associated with the sight, with the vision. Right visual cortex receives information from left visual field. Now do you get? Whatever left eye is going to perceive the information about the vision, about the sight, is going to be received by the right visual cortex. Meaning is that you get how it is going, that I'll explain you when we discuss about the visual pathways, when we discuss about the eye, that time I will explain. Okay, so here the right cortex is going to receive the signal from the left, and the left cortex is going to receive the informations from the right. Okay, and then the another some areas of the cortex, they are associated with the motor activities, that is the motor area. Okay, the motor areas are located in both the hemispheres of the cortex. The motor areas are very closely related to control of voluntary movements, especially fine fragmented movements performed by the hand. So when the fine fragmented movements means when you're about to touch an object, you have to decide that how much you have to move, right? That means when how much you have to move, and also when you have to hold an object, you have to move your hand as well as your fingers. That movement has to coordinate. Okay, means they have to help each other to catch hold of an object. So these activities are controlled by the motor areas. Okay, the voluntary movements, they are particularly controlled by the motor areas. The right half of the motor area controls the left side of the body, and vice versa. And that means the left half will control the right side of the body. Okay, then the two areas of the cortex are commonly referred to as motor, that means the primary motor cortex, and another as the supplementary motor areas and premotor cortex. The primary motor cortex executes voluntary movements, and supplementary motor areas and the motor cortex select the voluntary movements, means which kind of the movement needs to be performed. Okay, that will be decided, and then the primary cortex, motor cortex, will execute the voluntary movement. Okay, so in the cortex there are two portions again. One is the sensory area, another is the motor area. Sensory area is going to get the signal, okay, the signals from the different portions of the body. Motor area is going to exhibit the motor activities, particularly the voluntary movements. Okay, so this picture is showing some motor, sensory and association areas of the cerebral cortex. So on the cerebral cortex, different portions are associated with different activities. Okay, say motor writing center, frontal eye field, frontal lobe. Okay, so you can just go through. Okay, nothing much to explain here. It's not that there is nothing much to explain. There are many things to explain. Okay, but I don't want to go much into detail. Okay, but simply you know that which area is associated with what. The occipital lobe is associated with what kind of activity. The frontal lobe is activated with what kind of activity. What is the role of the parietal lobe? Okay, like that. Temporal lobe. What is the function of the temporal lobe? What is the main activity associated? So those things you have to know. Okay, you have to read yourself. Then sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system. We have discussed. I have explained you already. Okay, in the previous classes. These are the autonomic activities. Anything so far up to this point you want to know? from here, I want to move to the reflex action. So we have discussed about medulla oblongata, pons, and the cerebral cortex. In the cerebral cortex, the sensory area and motor area. Okay. Then come to the next. Okay, that is reflex action. The reflex action is also known as simply as a reflex. You must be knowing reflex. What is reflex? How do you define reflex? Hello? Yes? Response to a stimulus. Yes, it is the response to a stimulus. So this reflex, simply we say that it is almost, it is involuntary and almost instantaneous. Here, okay. Okay, let's read this line. That is, a reflex action is also known as a reflex. It is an involuntary and nearly instantaneous movement in response to a stimulus. That means when a stimulus is given, the response which comes in response to this stimulus, okay, any response you get as a result of that stimulus. So if it is a reflex, it has to be involuntary. Okay, so when you define a reflex, you cannot miss these two words. One is involuntary and another is nearly instantaneous, almost instantaneous. So these two words you cannot miss. If someone asks how you define a reflex, then you have to define that it is an involuntary, nearly instantaneous movement in response to a stimulus. So this happens in response to a stimulus, but what happens here is involuntary and it is nearly instantaneous. Okay, it is, if it is voluntary, suppose this action is happening in response to a stimulus, but it is voluntary and it is taking long time, then it is not called a reflex. You got the point? It has to be involuntary and it has to be nearly instantaneous, and it is in the form of movement. Okay, so the reflex action is involuntary, nearly instantaneous movement. So you cannot miss these words, okay, when you define reflex, and these are happening in response to a stimulus. So in humans and higher animal beings, reflex actions are mediated via a reflex arc. What do you understand by an arc? What do you understand by arc? What's the meaning of arc? A-R-C. Yes? Yes? Circle. Cycle. Not exactly. Anyone else who can tell this arc?
Ma'am, circumference of a circle.
Yeah, to some extent, arc is a portion of the circumference of a circle, or it is a curved portion, isn't it? Arc is a portion of the circumference of a circle. It is not, if it is a cycle, it has to complete. One point, starting point, then goes around and comes to this starting point and ends here, right? If it is a cycle. If it is a complete circumference, then it is the whole of the cycle or whole of the circle, right? Arc, it is a curved portion. That means It is starting from one point and going not in the straight line, but some few points are joined, right? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, so you have to understand arc here. So this arc consists of, okay, this reflex arc consists of a receptor organ. That means it has to have a receptor organ, a sensory neuron. This receptor organ, okay, has to sense some, like this is going to sense some stimulus, okay, and this stimulus will go and this will be sensed by a sensory neuron. Okay, the stimulus will go to the sensory neuron. Okay, that means the stimulus will go to the receptor organ and that will be sensed by a sensory neuron. This sensory neuron will go to the spinal tract. Okay, there it will associate, it will give the stimulus to an association neuron. Then from this association neuron, it through the spinal tract, it will come out as a motor message through a motor neuron. This motor neuron will give the signal to an effector organ. That effector organ will exhibit an action in the form of a response. Here that means it consists of a receptor organ, a sensory neuron, association neuron, a motor neuron, and an organ. So how? That means this is what did I say? Receptor organ. So this is the organ having the receptor, which is going to get the stimulus. The receptor organ, okay, will be sending the stimulus through the sensory neuron. Sensory neuron, which is present in the receptor organ, is going to sense this stimulus. This will take the message, the stimulus, into the spinal tract, will transmit its information to the association neuron. The association neuron is present in the gray matter of the spinal cord. From the association neuron, the message will come out through the motor neuron. The motor neuron will be innervating an effector organ. Now this effector organ will exhibit an action in the form of a response. Now this is going in the form of an arc, just like a portion of a circle. Okay, so this arc is called the reflex arc. Okay, here what you have to remember is the sensory neuron enters through the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. Dorsal horn, you know, dorsal horn and the ventral horn of the spinal vertebra. Have you studied this? Spinal vertebra? Yes or no? This portion, above portion. This is the dorsal horn and this is the ventral horn. Here what you have to remember is the sensory signals will be entering through the dorsal horn and the motor neuron will be coming out from the ventral horn. And where will be the association neuron present? Association neuron will be present in the gray matter of the spinal cord. Okay, this much you have to remember. So how the stimulus is going to the receptor, then through the sensory neuron, then to the association neuron, then to the motor neuron, to the effector neuron in the form of response. This arc is called a reflex arc. Okay, so you cannot insert this sensory neuron from the ventral horn. If you insert from here, then it is wrong. Okay, otherwise, and also if somebody asks what are the components of a reflex arc, then you have to write in this sequence. This is going to happen in this sequence 1 2 2 1 to 5. If you write a sensory neuron first, then a receptor organ, then a motor neuron, then as you remember, okay, as you remember, if you keep on writing number 4 in the first, number 3 second, like that, then it is not going to form the arc to exhibit a reflex action, or it is not going to form reflex arc at all. Do you get my point? Yes. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if the question is what are the components of a reflex arc, you have to write in this sequence. You have to make an arc. When these things are connected, it has to form an arc. That's why I asked what is the meaning of arc. You have to know the meaning of arc. Then only you will be able to write the sequence. You have to write in the sequence, then only when these sequences are connected, then only it is going to form an arc. And then only there will be reflex arc. Okay? Okay, so you can simply draw very just understanding picture. Okay, then you have to write stimulus going to the receptor, then through a sensory neuron it is going entering the spinal cord, okay, through the dorsal horn and connecting with an association neuron present in the gray matter of the spinal cord and exiting the spinal cord through a motor neuron and going to an effector organ. The effector organ will respond, okay, and there will be a response. This effector organ exhibit an action. That action is the response. Okay, so it will be the reflex will be that when a pin pricks onto a skin, how the response goes to an effector organ. When you get a prick by a pin, then how your muscles respond, how your finger muscles or the leg muscles, how they respond, that is the action, the reflex action, that is the reflex. Okay, so the stimulus is going through the dorsal horn and motor action is coming through the ventral horn. Okay, and the action will be exhibited. So this is how that when a hammer hits onto a knee, okay, then the signal, the sensory signal, it will enter through the dorsal horn and the motor activity will come out through the ventral horn, and this will act onto a group of muscles. Okay, so the group of muscles, these will be acting onto the extensor group of muscles, and this will allow the extensor muscles. Okay, so this will allow the extensor muscles and it will enable the leg to lift up. When the hammer is hit here, this will definitely lift up the leg. Wow, how it is possible? Because this signal is acting onto the extensor group of muscles. Okay, simply I'm just giving some example. Same like that. Here, when a signal, okay, the receptor is going, okay, when a receptor is going at the prick, suppose, or at this hit at the hammer, then the signal will be going through the dorsal horn and the motor activity will come through the ventral horn to lift up this leg. Okay. Do you understand what is a reflex arc? Okay, here I just want to explain what is a reflex arc. Or if simply you are asked what is a reflex, then you have to write that reflex is the involuntary, nearly instantaneous response, okay, or movement in response to a stimulus. Okay, so these 3 points are important. And the reflex arc consists of a cell, a receptor organ, a sensory neuron, interneuron, motor neuron, and an effector organ. Okay, then you can make a sketch that this is the sensory neuron where the stimulus is going, then the dorsal root, then the ventral root, the gray matter where the association neuron will be present, coming out as a motor neuron and coming to the effector organ, and the response is produced. So that completes the reflex action. Okay. So these are just these figures I'm showing just for your understanding. Okay, so the reflexes can be divided. Okay, they can be grouped into different types of the categories. So here I have divided into 2 groups. One is the tendon reflex, another is the reflexes involving cranial nerves. So in the tendon reflexes, numbers of the reflexes are there, like biceps reflex, brachioradialis reflex, extensor digitorum reflex, triceps reflex, patellar reflex, then ankle jerk reflex, plantar reflex. So this patellar jerk reflex is this one. Okay, so this can also be grouped as an extensor reflex also, because the extensor group of muscles are also involved. So different modes of classifications are there. So I have grouped them in the simplest classification. Okay, say biceps reflex, those brachioradialis reflex, in which the different groups of muscles are involved. Okay, then pupillary light, say in the cranial nerve reflex, the names of the reflexes are like pupillary light reflex. This pupillary light reflex you must have come across many a times. What happens when you come from a room, okay, when you come from a room to outside, from a dark room to outside, outside is very sunny, suppose, then what happens to your eyes? You cannot just open your eyes. Is it yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Why? You know, that is due to the pupillary light reflex, because your pupil, okay, the size of the pupil controls the amount of the light to enter into the eye, okay, for perception of the vision. So when you were in a dark room, your pupil was dilated. Your pupils were dilated, so that you can get maximum light in a dark room, okay, because the source of the light is less. So just to get a maximum amount of light, your pupils were dilated. But immediately when you come out of that room, with that dilated pupil, you cannot adjust the light which is present in that very sunny and full of light. Okay, in that time you have to constrict your pupils. You have to constrict to minimize the entry of the light. Okay, so that is the pupillary light reflex. Okay, it's the same thing like when you are in a sunny place and suddenly you go into the room, suddenly you don't see anything because your pupil was adjusting the amount of the light outside, but once you go inside the room, your pupil needs relaxation, but that requires some time. So immediately you don't see anything, but later on you see slowly. Okay, so that is due to the pupillary light reflex. Accommodation reflex. So accommodation reflex means how you adjust your eye to see a near object or the far object. So this kind of the reflex, it is very strong in case of the prey animals, and also in those birds who can fly very high. Their accommodation power is very good. They have to have a good accommodation reflex. Okay, then Zozerk reflex. So this is Zozerk reflex means when some food substances are present and how your jaw movement, all those are associated in this. Another is the corneal reflex or the blink reflex. Say if something comes near your eyes, you just blink your eyes. So that is the corneal or the blink reflex. Then vestibulo-ocular reflex. This is vestibulo-ocular reflex is like how you maintain your equilibrium. Do you understand the maintenance of equilibrium? Are you aware of this term, equilibrium?
Yes, ma'am.
What is that? Equilibrium.
Balance.
Yes?
Balance.
Balance, yes. It is the balance. That means, like you see, this is something like, even if you're, when you turn your head, but you fix your eye to an object, you're able to see that object. Still, you will still be able to see that object. You fix your eye to an object and you keep on turning your head, okay, with the movement of your neck. That is due to the vestibulo-ocular reflex. Okay, you maintain an equilibrium by your vestibule, and that is adjusted with your eye. Okay, and that is the vestibulo-ocular reflex. Okay, then another is the gag reflex. Gag reflex, I will show you. This gag reflex I will show you in the form of figure. Okay, so what are those? And some names of the reflexes. One is the nociceptive reflex. Nociceptive reflex is this kind of reflex. Say when you touch an hot object, then your flexor group of muscles, okay, the flexor, you understand flexor and extensor group of muscles? Yes or no? Do you understand flexor group of muscles and extensor group of muscles? Yes or no?
No, madam.
No. Flexor group of flexion, you understand the movement of the hand. If this hand move from here to here, this, okay, from your hand, this moves to here. Just you flex your hand. This you understand flexion. This hand, it moves up here. That is called flexion. if this hand moves down, it stretches, suppose, then it is called extension. Do you understand this? Flexion and extension. Do you get?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If you move this up, that is called flexion. If this you straighten it, then it is called extension. Okay. Those muscles which are associated with the flexion, the movement of the flexion, those are called flexor group of muscles. Those muscles which are associated with extension, they are called extensor group of muscles. Okay. In this nociceptive withdrawal reflex, the flexor group of muscles, okay, when the stimulus goes, it will contract the flexor group of muscles. Due to the contraction of this flexor group of muscles, the hand will remove immediately from this hot object. Okay. During this flexor group of muscles, okay, these will relax. When the extensor group of muscles are relaxed, there will be, and side by side, there will be contraction of the flexor group of muscles. There will be possibility of the withdrawal of this hand. How you are going to withdraw? Suddenly you will move up. Okay, so this is kind of a reflex which involves nociceptor or withdrawal reflex. That in the withdrawal reflex, in the withdrawal reflex of the hand, there is involvement of flexor group of muscles and also the extensor group of muscles. So in that, flexor group of muscles contract and the extensor group of muscles relax. Okay. Is it difficult to understand? You know simply that one example of nociceptive withdrawal reflex or flexion reflex. So in this, you remove your hand after touching an hot object. Simply you know that the flexor group of muscles contract and that enables the movement of the hand away from the hot object. Okay. Then another is a cross extensor reflex. So in this cross extensor reflex, you see in this figure, so someone someone puts the feet onto a nail. Okay. And this is felt. The stimulus goes. Then due to that, what happened? This leg lifts up. When this leg lifts up, the flexor group of muscles are contracted here. Okay. Then during this flexor group of muscles, in the opposite side or in the opposite leg, the extensor group of muscles are extended. Means relax. Okay. So this is a function of cross extensor reflex. That means on this side, flexor group of muscles, they are flexed, and in the opposite side, other muscles are extended. Okay, that is cross extensor reflex. So in this, extensor muscles on opposite leg is involved. Okay, which shifts the gravity to the left side. That means due to the instantaneous lifting of this leg, the opposite legs, okay, carries the gravity. Okay, the center of the gravity of this person goes to the that is shifted and it is carried by this muscle, and the another opposite extensor group of muscles are involved here when the stimulus is going in the another opposite side. Okay, so this type of reflex is the cross-extensor reflex. It is something like this. Here, when the stimulus goes here, flexor group of muscles contract while the extensors are inhibited. So these extensors are inhibited while the flexors are contracted. Okay, so due to this, there is shifting of the center of gravity to the another opposite leg, and this allows the extensor muscles, okay, the extensor muscles contract. Okay, there will be contraction of the extensor muscles, which allows the extension of this leg, and this time the flexor group of muscles are inhibited. That means which will prevent the flexion of this leg. Okay, so this kind of the reflex is called the cross-extensor reflex. Stress reflex, where is that? Gag reflex. So this is gag reflex. Okay, so okay, so other reflex we will continue in the next class. Okay, so today we have discussed about medulla oblongata, bones, cerebral cortex, okay, their functions. Then what is reflex action? What are the components of a reflex arc? How is the classification of reflex, and some names of the reflexes. Okay, so these names you know, say nociceptive withdrawal reflex. This is also a flexor reflection reflex. Then the cross extensor reflex. Okay, so you can cite this example. Stress reflex. Okay, in the next class, I'll tell you some more reflexes. I'll explain some more reflexes like micturition reflex. Those are important reflex. Okay, I'll explain in the next class. Okay, is it okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
You go through the notes which I gave. Okay, everything is there. Okay, let's stop here for today.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.